A 10K just gets filed once a year. It's the big annual report that public companies file. There is just a ton of information that these companies have to put out there, and I think a lot of lawyers don't even know that it exists.
Welcome to the Contract Teardown Show from Law Insider, where legal experts tear down contracts from some of the most well-known companies and high-profile executives around the world.
In this episode, Mitchell Hamline law professor Jen Riza tells us about Walmart's most recent 10K filing with the SEC. As Jen says, the 10K is a great way to get insider information about public companies like Walmart. And she uncovers the kind of details you'll find that will give you a strategic advantage both in deals and in litigation. So, let's tear it down. Today, I have my friend Jen Riza. How are you today, Jen?
I'm great, Mike. Thanks for having me on.
Happy to have you. We've got another cool, weird, every time I invite law professors, we get some weird angle on it. So we're going to deal with a special kind of document today. It's this document called a Form 10K. It's Walmart's. It's super long. It's so many words, so many numbers, 88 pages, I think it was. And I think, Jen, you said that they filed this in March with the SEC. Is that right?
That's right, Mike. A 10K just gets filed once a year. It's the big annual report that public companies file. So based on Walmart's fiscal year, they filed this in March. So
tell me, Jen, when are you going to see this kind of document? You mentioned it's filed once a year. Why does it matter to the lawyers that are zooming in right now and paying attention? Why pay attention to us talking about this weirdo document?
Fair. Well, all public companies have to put just a ton of information out into the market on an annual, quarterly, and frequent basis. And that information can be really helpful to us as lawyers, whether we are representing counterparties to those big public companies. Maybe we're preparing for an interview and want to see the kind of language that they talk about or the things that they care about. Maybe we represent an employee who's been fired, or we're researching their executives. There is just a ton of information that these companies have to put out there, and I think a lot of lawyers don't even know that it exists.
Now, tell me about you, because you teach this stuff at the law school. Tell me about your background, what kind of classes you teach, and what's bringing you here.
Yeah, so I'm a business law professor at the Mitchell Hamline School of Law in St. Paul, Minnesota. But before that, I was in private practice and in-house doing this kind of securities work. So I helped my clients draft 10K filings and other reports, including disclosing sort of, tricky things and things that we were required to report by the SEC. And we also had to think about how our shareholders would react to them. So I have a lot of thoughts when I read a 10K.
You're my kind of nerd. All right, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to go through different sections of this 10K. What I would encourage you guys to do is, if you go to the document, and we'll make sure you have the link to it, use the table of contents liberally. It is a very long document. We'll try to take you through some of these. And what we're trying to draw out of this is some drafting conversation and a bit about the strategic stuff, which you can pull out, like Jen said. So let's start real quick, Jen, with the business statement. Early on, Walmart tries to establish what they're trying to do. And what they say is, Walmart helps people around the world save money and live better anytime and anywhere by providing the opportunity to shop in retail stores and through e-commerce. They talk about innovation, customer-centric experience, and something I wanted to talk to you about, this omni-channel offering. This sounds really aspirational, really marketing-y. What's the purpose in this early statement?
Right. So every company is going to start this with this item one, a description of their business. And they get to write this. And you're right, it is somewhat kind of a marketing tool, somewhat aspirational. But it also has to be highly factual, because otherwise they face the potential of shareholder lawsuits saying that they overhyped. So one of the things that I find helpful here is to look at the kind of language that they use. A lot of businesses, when they talk about launching things like delivery or pickup, might use different terms. Walmart's favorite term is omni-channel for that, meaning people can come in into the store, drop by for pickup or get delivery.
Yeah, and they dig deeper into the omni-channel thing in the text. They say, we're doing it through services like same-day pickup, same-day delivery, delivery unlimited, next-day delivery, endless aisle. it feels like what they're trying to do, and correct me if I'm wrong, is they're looking at their competition with Amazon and saying, what can't Amazon do, which is this integrated approach. Let's do that. Am I getting that right?
That's exactly right, right. And as a reader of the 10K, we sort of understand that competitive background, even though they don't mention Amazon by name. We know that Amazon is the gorilla in the corner when we read Walmart's 10K. I also find it really interesting to read this because, as we said, it came out in March. And so Walmart was fortunate that they had already started to work on these kind of delivery and same-day pickup before the pandemic hit, right? Because then when we read their later reports, when we read the things that have come out in the last couple of months, we see that that's really exploded as to what customers have wanted in the pandemic. So when we look at this, this is a sort of a time capsule of what they already had in place when the pandemic hit.
Yeah, I remember saying to my wife several months ago, like, all these orange areas are super annoying because this used to be good parking over here, and now we don't have that parking anymore because there's all this orange stuff. And of course, Walmart is way smarter than I am, and they did the right thing. All right, all over the news, employees and Walmart, it's constant. They've got a section on employees. They note that at the end of 2020, they've got more than 2.2 million employees and talk about their relationship. They say, as with most companies, we have a large turnover, but we're trying to improve that by increasing wages and having improved tools and technology to train associates. Does this tell you anything, this section about employees, about their actual relationship with employees right now?
Yeah, so again, it's helpful for us to think about this in the context outside, what Walmart is choosing to say as well. You may remember that several years ago, Walmart was really roundly criticized for paying wages in the U.S. that basically added up to a full-time job being below the poverty level and having food drives within their stores so that employees could give food to other employees. Okay, so all of that kind of criticism created a lot of bad press for Walmart. They took some specific actions in reaction to it, including raising their minimum wage. And so they are attempting now to put the very best light on that initiative and come back to their shareholders and say, this language about our relationship with our employees has improved, our turnover has improved because of the actions that we took.
Yeah, and tell me, I meant to ask you, this is about the end of 2020, and they're sending it in March, and I'm assuming if they had sent it in June or July, it might have been very different. You mentioned that this report is turned in once a year. I was just curious, is there another report that somebody might be able to figure out in July? Okay, what's Walmart actually doing? Because everything changed, right, in March, April, May, June, July.
It sure did. Yeah. So let me back up just a little bit. So the Securities and Exchange Commission requires public companies to do what we call the periodic reporting system. Okay. I see your eyes glazing over, Mike, but hang on there with me. So that means that every year after they close the books on each fiscal year, they're going to turn around and file a Form 10K reporting on that full year. Mm-hmm. That's going to be your longest, biggest report that includes those audited financial statements. But then in the other 3 quarters of the year, you file a kind of medium length form called a Form 10Q that includes updates about your business, your financials, and other kind of key measures. And then, so those are quarterly, okay? And then every year, and then in addition, you're going to file what's called a Form 8K when you have intervening events that are material. So some of the ones that we especially see are things like declaring bankruptcy, right, adding a public company director to your board, or entering into a material definitive agreement, including a merger agreement. Okay, so if any of those things happen, then the company has to quick prepare a Form 8K and get that filed as well. So as company outsiders, we can look at a company's list of SEC filings and see the whole set of 10Ks, 10Qs, 8Ks, and other assorted filings that are all kind of date stamped. And by reading those together, we can get a really good picture of how things are changing over time, what has happened most recently, et cetera. And these things are out there forever. which is a little daunting as a securities lawyer, that it's
It's your permanent
you don't have any
writing.
ability to edit it once you file it with the SEC.
Well, so like for example, let's take under the employees. It mentions executive officers, and they've got a list of executive officers, and of course, you got like 10 people up here who are surprisingly young. I was sort of surprised that their execs are in their 40s and low 50s. One of them, Rachel Brand, even taught at a law school once. So there's hope for all of you law professors who want to have a job that actually
I
pays.
suspect he's making a great deal more money at
Yeah,
Walmart.
exactly.
We can dig into the filings more and find that out, actually.
Exactly. So for like this kind of thing for executive officers, if you're listing that off, is that the kind of thing that would trigger another type of reporting, or is this enough for just a once a year we added so and so?
You've got both. So every year you give that snapshot of who our top executives are right now in the 10K. But to the extent that you add or lose one of your top executives in the middle of the year, then you would have to also file that 8K, an update.
In the case of Walmart, they also have a section on properties. It's under item 2. Why is it because Walmart is sort of such an asset-driven business? They have all these physical spaces that this is important to list them all off. Is this common in, say, a software company? What's the need for putting properties into this kind of document?
Yeah, so a public company has to respond to the items that are in the SEC forms, right? So regardless of what kind of company they are, they're going to have to talk about their material properties. But their response, of course, you're right, is going to vary depending on their business model and so forth. So here, Walmart has a lot of properties to tell us about, and they've chosen to break it down by state and by type of business. We've got super centers, discount stores, et cetera, and then also Sam's Club. Other companies might choose to break it down differently, or they might just say, we lease our headquarters in Santa Barbara, California.
So another section that I'm thinking of that strategic use of going through this document is in item 3, they've got legal proceedings, and there's a bit of an overview of what those proceedings are, but then they make the decision to list certain groups of lawsuits. The one that caught my attention was the opiate litigation. I read a book recently called Death and Mudlick, which is really good, about how these litigants are going after the distributors in addition to the pharmaceutical companies. And so companies like Walmart, who are distributing these drugs, are in trouble for this. How do you decide, if you're the drafter, what kind of litigation makes that grade, what gets into this document and what doesn't? And then on the flip side, if I'm about to get in a litigation with Walmart or, a deal with Walmart, how can I use this list of pending litigation to my advantage?
Yes, great question. So first, the things that you have to report here are what's called your material pending litigation. Okay, so matters that are open, that have gone all the way, to a court filing kind of situation and have not closed, but also have the possibility of having a material effect on your financial statements. Okay, so I'm sure that Walmart has lots and lots of smaller claims that they do not have to disclose here. And of course, as you mentioned, a company would probably like to disclose as little as it can here. So it's not going to disclose, say, a single employee lawsuit that it might settle for, $150,000 or something like that. Okay. But to the extent that they have to disclose it, then they have to give updates here of how that litigation is proceeding. So as you said, we can see that Walmart is a defendant in this consolidated opiate litigation. And as most big consolidated federal litigation is, it is moving slowly through the process of being heard in the federal courts. Occasionally, people will also add color, something like, we are defending this suit vigorously and do not expect it to have a material effect on our operations. Sometimes you see language like that. So how could you use this as a litigant? Well, I have definitely seen lawyers get, good information about sort of other suits that companies are facing that might give them a greater understanding of their own kind of litigation strategy against a public company. And I think it would actually also be interesting if you were litigating this particular case to see how these companies are positioning your litigation. Perhaps perhaps that might affect your strategy as well.
Right. You might get a sense of how vigorously they fight back, what kind of discovery people were able to get, how many hearings were out there.
Possibly.
Yeah, definitely interesting. And I found later in the document there's this conversation about share repurchase. It looks like they're buying a lot of their shares back. Am I reading that right?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. So the form requires them to talk about how many shares they bought back just in each quarter. But when we look at the table and just do a little bit of math, Walmart is reporting that they spent $885 million during just that first quarter, the first quarter of 2020. That's the fourth quarter of the year just ended. But $885 million buying back their own stock.
Yeah. I mean, millions of shares, 7.5 million shares, which is a lot. So if I'm either entering a deal with them or I'm competing with them in a litigation, how does this kind of information, what does this tell me?
Yeah, the stock repurchase information is really about how a company chooses to use its cash. Okay, so Walmart, in the course of its business operations, is throwing off a lot of excess cash. And so it's an interesting both business and public policy question about where Walmart chooses to use that cash. Do they use it to acquire? Do they use it to improve their businesses, or to pay their employees, or to buy back their stock? Right. We've seen some interesting, I think, public policy chatter and proposals by Elizabeth Warren and others to limit stock buybacks because, like I said, that's a choice that companies are making to buy back their stock instead of investing in businesses or employee wages. So this is where we would find the data for conversations like that.
So as we're wrapping up, I kind of want to pull a general principle from you. It seems like rather than, again, like you said, there's some drafting stuff to learn from this. You've had to draft these kinds of things. So talk to me about principles you can pull from this document and using this kind of document. But also, I'm seeing it as a bit of a research tool that whether you're entering a deal with somebody or you're litigating against them, as you're teaching your students, hey, look at these documents. Why? What's the big principle that we can draw from looking at these documents?
These are very, very carefully written documents. And when we talk about the level of drafting and the amount of money that's spent on making these disclosures perfect, it is probably one of the highest levels of anything that you would see. I think mostly, though, it's a helpful research tool, whether you are engaging with a public company on something like you said, or researching them for, other uses. And it's just a really a huge amount of information that a lot of people don't even know exists.
Right. So whether it's a merger or you're just trying to enter a deal with them, you've got a client, you represent somebody else that you're trying to connect with them, you might be able to line it up with their strategy, right? If I'm going in and I'm making a pitch to Walmart, for my client for some kind of extended agreement, I might be able to say, well, this works really well with your omni-channel things. So let's go, because all the kids love the orange lines now.
That's exactly right. And being able to talk the jargon of a company and to think about what they think is important is really key for being able to attract their attention for a merger or do well in an interview or whatever.
Well, that's great. We'll make sure that people have a link to this at lawinsider.com/resources so they can look over this. And also, we'll be posting some of these on Law Insider. As far as you getting in touch with smart friends, how do people best reach out to you, Jen?
They can reach out to me at Mitchell Hamlin at jen.riza@mitchellhamlin.com. I also have a side hustle that I call JD Navigator, where I try to give people the information that they need in order to make an informed decision about law school. So that's another way to get hold of me is through jdnavigator.com.
We law schools hate informed decisions about law school. So,
Well, could we debate that in a future
wait,
episode?
yeah, I can't take you down a tangent. You're going to get me in trouble. Guys, thank you for hanging out with us. Will all be posted, like I said, at lawinsider.com/resources. If you want to be a contributor in one of these teardowns, just email us at community@lawinsider.com. We'll share more of these with you in the future. Thanks again. Thanks, Jen.
Thank you.